Hey guys, Sen here. Today we're over here in the Foons, which is the number 4 clan in the world for clan capital rankings, and I believe they've been top 10 ever since the ranking system first began, so big shout out to them and the homie The Secret. But let's take a look at their most recent raid log to see how they have been doing this. So right now, 17 attacks per clan is considered a perfect performance with 3 attacks on the capital peak and then 2 for the other districts. And scrolling through, you can see that they're doing that consistently and even going sub perfect with 16s and 15s against a bunch of the clans they're facing. They only messed up twice, which was this 19 and this 18 down here, because sometimes the matchmaking is going to match you with those higher level districts with better bases. But you can see what it takes to be at the top right now. Their average is beyond perfect performance, and the few clans even higher are even nuttier. Up here, you simply cannot fail at all, with Graveyard and matchmaking being what they are. And today we're going to cover one of the reasons they've been doing so well, which is the Capital Peak 2-shot. Actually, they have allowed me to park one of my alts over here that I occasionally will do my capital raids on, and so I was able to achieve one of those 2 shots for them. So let's take a look how I was able to get this done. So ta-da, it is the Graveyard spell. I don't believe I have covered this spell ever since it got that second nerf. And no, that nerf didn't do anything. And yes, the Graveyard spell is still giga busted, especially against the Capital Peak. The Graveyard spell is basically the only way that you can reliably take out a Capital Peak in 2 shots. So we're going to see how. So the first thing to keep in mind is that not all Capital Peaks you can take out in 2 attacks. A lot of them you can't. But right now, with the way matchmaking works and every clan above 1600 being able to match each other, the majority of your clans up here you're going to face are going to be right around that 1600 upgrade threshold. It's just the highest density of clans, so that's the most likely thing you're going to run into. And so a lot of those clans at 1600 upgrades don't actually have their Dragon Post built, or they haven't put it inside the base. It's that default room with the Dragon Post and Blast Bow that you can pick off super easily with Inferno Dragons, and that makes your life a lot easier. So those are going to be the main bases that you're going to be targeting for 2 shots. This base obviously has its Dragon Post built inside of it, and so we're going to see how I'm still able to take it out. So starting off, I noticed that down south, it's just a bunch of cannons and trash buildings, and there's no air coverage over here. But you can see I actually get kind of debated with the minions because there's actually air traps up here, so they get blown up by bombs. But because I split my minions to go in separate directions, and also I got a little bit lucky with the bottom pack of minions splitting in such a nice way, some of those minions are able to survive, and I give them all the time that they need in the world to clear out all the trash that they can. Because the Graveyard spam portion is so fast, even if I give up like an entire minute for those minions to clear out all the trash buildings, I'm going to have no issues with time. So I give them all the time that they need in the world to make sure that I can save as many troops as I can for deeper on inside the base. But that third bomb spells the doom of those last few minions, and I just drop down a ram. Those barbarians will tank for those wizards that I send for the cannon to take that out and then go ahead and clear some trash buildings. Because the defenses are outside the range of the wizards, I have no problem just giving those wizards a little bit of time to clear some of those trash buildings, and then in behind I drop some ramps. So I noticed that against this space, it's super compact in that most of the space inside the walls is being occupied by buildings, which means there's not that many spaces for traps, and there are a lot of traps on a Capital Peak, and this means that there are going to be a ton of traps on the outside of the base. So I dropped that first blanket of ramps to try to test for some of those traps, so my wizards that I send in afterwards have less to worry about. You can see a log trap, you can see a giant bomb, and there's even going to be another giant bomb. So then afterwards, I drop that first layer of rams, I drop down my second layer of rams as my wizards start approaching that first layer of defenses, and then my Graveyard spell. So notice how I hold on to the Graveyard spell. Because the Graveyard spell spawns a limited amount of skeletons, you want to make sure those skeletons spawn at a time that's going to be relevant, and that's going to be when those skeletons can distract those key defenses while my wizards are trying to push their way inside. Also, while those rams can get deeper inside the base and also distract for those Graveyard skeletons to do their damage as well. And most importantly, I drop one of those Graveyard spells on top of the Dragon Post. If you're dealing with an internal Dragon Post, your wizards are not going to be able to take that thing out, and you want to take out that Dragon Post so you can drag it outside of the base to where you can pick it off with an Inferno Dragon. And then I also drop my other 2 Graveyard spells nearby, one on top of the Giant Cannon and one on top of the Blast Bow Dead Zone. You want to drop them on top of those big defenses, big splash defenses, and have them distract those defenses as well as taking them out. and that's going to make sure that because those graveyard spells are all kind of nearby each other, that the ones on top of the Dragon Post are not going to get, or the Larrys on top of the Dragon Post are not going to get focused down, and so they're going to have enough time to DPS that Dragon Post down. I even dropped down that Lightning spell to make sure it goes down. It's a level 1 post, which makes it a lot easier on me, and that Dragon Post goes down, and that dragon is never going to fly back to its post. But you can see how fast this thing goes. Those wizards die out super fast on the first attack. I'll drop down one more ram to take out this Tesla and that air bombs with a barbarian. And notice how I held on to a few troops and an Inferno Dragon. After that Dragon Post goes down, I can now drag that dragon anywhere I want in the base, and I'm going to try to take it out with those rams to distract, as well as the Inferno Dragon to DPS it down. So if you're going to run in against a enemy Super Dragon post, you want to take out that Super Dragon on the first attack. The main reason for that is because if you take it out on the second attack, that means that your graveyard spells that are going to linger around for the second hit, they're going to spawn a lot of Air Larrys, and you do not want to spawn Air Larrys. So if you can take out the enemy Super Dragon on the first hit, those graveyard spells that you have set down from the first attack are going to get way more value than otherwise. I try to drop down one more ram and one barbarian to finish off that blast bow, but that barb doesn't do enough damage. But he's gonna get really close, and this blast bow and this giant cannon are super low, and we're gonna be looking super solid for a 2-shot. And so from here, it's a matter of how you drop your troops in basically the first 5 seconds. The first 5 seconds of a graveyard spell spam attack are basically everything, and you have to be super precise on this. So we'll put this at ×1/2 speed. I first drop down my graveyard spells on top of the rocket artillery and giant cannon on the backside. I want to keep these defenses distracted so that while my wizards are on top of this capital peak, they're going to be safely protected by the distraction of those Larrys, as well as a P.E.K.K.A. to help tank for those capital peak beams. Because you do not have a heal spell, I bring a rage spell instead to make those wizards go faster. You have no way to heal the wizards. You have to make sure that they're well protected. And then afterwards, I drop down a blanket of ramps to keep those first few defenses distracted, as well as starting to generate those Larrys from the graveyard. And in behind, I'll drop down one barbarian on top of this bomb tower while the spirit thrower is distracted. Snipe the bomb tower. Bomb towers are super annoying, so I noticed that because I'm able to snipe that with the barbarian, it's going to be super high value. Giant to go south to help take out these defenses and go after this wizard tower afterwards, then a P.E.K.K.A. to go in after this capital peak in behind, as well as those rams to try to distract this Inferno Tower. You don't want that Inferno Tower to lock onto top of your P.E.K.K.A. I get a little bit lucky that those barbarians have just enough to distract that Inferno Tower, but now the P.E.K.K.A. is going to push in and distract that capital peak beam. A couple wizards in behind. Notice how I saved a couple wizards for later, deeper inside the base, to make sure that the capital peak locks onto the P.E.K.K.A. If you drop all your wizards at once, a lot of the time they're going to clump up, and the capital peak will actually target those wizards instead. Look at how much damage those wizards are doing with that help of that rage spell. You absolutely ripped that thing a new one, destroying that entire core of the base. And notice, because those wizards sort of clumped up and the P.E.K.K.A. was low, that capital peak actually eventually targeted those wizards, but it was way too late. Those wizards absolutely ripped apart that backside of the base, and there is like nothing left. One barbarian on top of the spirit thrower over here, and those wizards are going to take out those last few ranged defenses on the base, and there's just a crusher left, and that can't even shoot back at the wizards. So this base was super crushed. This went super fast. So even though it is a spam attack, there are a few things that you can do that can make this thing go super smoothly, especially taking out that dragon on the first attack, and also all that chain value on the backside of the base. Making sure that we take into account the traps as well, to make sure that we don't send our wizards at the start into all those traps. A couple ramps to distract for those. So a lot of things played a part into this capital peak 2-shot. Not all players can do this, so when you can, you're going to be able to set your clan ahead of the rest of the competition. Alright, here we go with the second attack. So I just had to take a quick swig of water because that first attack was so chaotic, so spammy, so much to try to keep up with that my throat was dying. But we are back with an attack from Guy 2, who's an actual member from the Foons, coming in with Graveyard Hogs against this base. And Graveyard Hogs is sort of the other attack that you want to have to know if you want to be consistently taking out capital peaks in 2 attacks. So while the Graveyard Wizards are a lot stronger and you're going to be using them a lot more, there are some bases like this one where the Graveyard Hogs are going to do way better against. And let's try to break down why. So the Graveyard Hogs work better in bases like this with this capital peak, and especially these rocket artilleries and a blast bow as a bonus. all back here in the corner over here, away from all those defenses near the front of the base. And that means because they're not covering those defenses and they're the major threats to the Hog Raiders, the Hog Raiders can go in and take out all those defenses before they get in range of those big threats to them, and take out a lot of defenses on the entry. Especially on a base like this that's more spread out, there's a lot more spaces for traps. The Hog Raiders are less vulnerable to traps, unlike your Wizards that get blown up by one giant bomb basically. So those Hog Raiders can survive a bomb and maybe a couple small bombs or so, and go in and take out some of those defenses. Also, the buildings are more spread out. That means your Wizards are going to have to move a lot more distance before reaching their targets, as well as the Wizard chains are just not going to chain as much as they did on that first tech. You saw how much value was around that capital peak on the first hit, whereas there's just not that much around the capital peak on this hit. And all those buildings are super spread out. So those Hog Raiders were definitely the right call against this base. He even drops down a Graveyard Spell on top of this Multi-Mortar. The big splash defenses are the #1 candidates for the Graveyard Spells, but the Multi-Mortars are probably the #2 priority, because those Multi-Mortar volleys absolutely rip apart your Larrys. So those are great candidates for your Graveyard Spells as well. Then he drops his third one up the left side of the base to tank for the Raid card, as well as his point defenses to help his Hogs up the left flank. And notice how he drops the Zap Spell on top of that Giant Cannon while those Hog Raiders were being targeted by that Giant Cannon. You have one Zap Spell when you bring 3 Graveyard Spells like this at CH10, which means that one Zap Spell, you can use that to either take out defenses that are low, like that Dragon Boost on the first hit, or in this case, reset that Giant Cannon, which would have blown up his Hogs on that next attack. And so those Hog Raiders were able to move further, take out that Giant Cannon, and take out that Mega Hidden Tesla, and that helped them get a lot more defenses out of the deal. He also brought in a pack of minions in behind. I absolutely love this. Those Hog Raiders took out all those air defenses, and then those minions go in behind because most people will not set their traps to air, unlike that first clan that debated me. Those minions are going to be free from any traps, so once those air defenses go down, those minions go ahead, take out that raid cart from above, and also just go ahead and take out those trash buildings on the outside, out of range of any defensive fire. Also, because the Hog Raiders took out all the air defenses in the area, those minions can even snipe that Multi-Mortar, which is a bonus. So those minions get so much value for him. I'm just going to ×4 from here because it's just one minion versus the entire world basically, and he has taken out a huge chunk of this base on the first attack. This base doesn't have the Dragon Post, like I said. A lot of bases that you're going to run into at 1600 plus upgrades don't have it, and so these bases are super vulnerable to Capital Peak 2 shots, especially when they're not well built against them, which this one is not. There is just very little left. He's already at the Capital Peak. He's going to drop down a Rage Spell, leading into the Capital Peak, a few ramps to get those Graveyard Spells going. He has a Graveyard on top of the Blast Spell and the Rock Artillery to take those buildings out, as well as distract those defenses on behind the Capital Peak, to make sure his Wizards don't get splashed by them as they try to chain down the Capital Peak. With the help of the Rage Spell, a P.E.K.K.A. to distract some of those beams. And I love this touch with these Hog Raiders. He brings a couple Hog Raiders to perpetually stun this Capital Peak. I've done this a couple times, so I can tell you that this works extremely well if you're able to afford those Hog Raiders. Stun that Capital to make sure it doesn't splash on top of your Wizards, and you will have a much better time taking that thing out. And there is just so many troops left on the map. So many Giants, so many Wizards everywhere, and that Giant Cannon is like the last bastion on this base, and it's distracted on some Giants punching it down, and there is nothing left. He absolutely ripped this thing to shreds, punishing it for putting all of its major splash defenses all the way back there. This is a strategy for base building that no longer works. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I just went into way too much depth on what is probably the dumbest attack to ever exist in this game. But there are a lot of little things that you can do to help improve your hit rate, and hopefully this helps you when you try to go for some CP2 shots. But make sure you join our Clan Capital Discord server if you haven't already. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and take care.